Hey guys, it's BenTbeyondrepair here with the 15.3 patch notes. We can see that there's nerfs to a bunch of different champions: Cassiopeia, Galio, Jayce, Misfortune, Rell, Skarner, Teemo, Viego, Wukong. Buffs to Evelyn, Jax, Kayn, Nasus, Quinn, Rakan, Samira, Swain, and Thresh. And a lot of system changes that we'll be focusing on since it's still only the third patch of the season. Obviously, with the introduction of a lot of new mechanics and things like that, they're going to be making a lot of changes since it's still the start of the season. So they're going to actually be increasing the attack speed cap from 2.5 maximum attacks per second to 3, which is going to help late game champions, late game AD carry champions be able to carry. Certain champions, obviously, that have attack speed steroids like Kog'Maw and Yi are doing really, really well with this because they're able to get there earlier than other champions. So that's something to keep an eye on. A lot of people's initial reaction to this is it's such a, it's one of these things that's like a fundamental part of the way that the game works. So changing it feels like, oh, this is going to be such a crazy change. But because this change doesn't really matter until you get very late into your build for most champions, I really don't think that this is going to be that big of a deal. I think it's a nice change for AD carries, but I don't think that it's going to do a whole lot because obviously, aside from certain champions that are going to be needing to be tuned back with this, for a lot of champions, this just isn't going to matter in the vast majority of games, 20, 30 minutes into the game, Bloodsong's getting changed. Champion bounties are getting changed. That'll be important to keep an eye on. They're changing both Chemtech Soul and Cloud Soul, so that's important. They're continuing to tinker with those domination runes, the new warding ones probably that they added. Actually, we don't know. It could be any of them, but probably that's what that was. And then Void Grubs, they're changing as well, so that's another big one. And then the support item, Zaz'Zak, is being changed as well. So let's see what they're doing. Let's see, what is this? They're depreciating support for older hardware or software. The only thing I'll say about this is that when Vanguard was introduced, they went kind of wild. I'm pretty sure that all Linux users and everybody like Windows 8, Windows 7 and below was now suddenly unable to play League of Legends permanently. And that is wild. And I think that they showed the numbers and that that was like 4% of the people who were playing League were on those operating systems. So I get that they have to, upgrade things in order to provide better stability and performance. And of course, as a player who might benefit from that, or, as someone who even just for competitive integrity's sake wants the game to perform well so that everyone can have high FPS and play the game at the highest level. I get that you have to do this and depreciate support for older systems, but I think it really sucks because we also need people to play the game. And if, you knock out a bunch of people from being able to play because of their hardware, that really sucks. But, I don't know the specific details of this. Streamer mode is being added. I think that it's nice that they're thinking about this, but I think that there's some practical issues that will prevent this from doing anything positive. Basically, what it's going to do is hide the names of all of the players that are in the lobby. But the problem with this is that, let's say you're sniping somebody and you want to confirm that you're on their team. If you want to confirm that you're on somebody's team, you're going to see, even if the usernames are hidden, you're going to see the roles in the order that the roles are in. So you might see, for example, that your support's first pick and your top second pick. So you're like, okay, I'm in this guy's lobby. You're going to see what champions are being hovered on the team. So you'll know, okay, in my lobby, somebody's hovering Braum. And in this guy's lobby, somebody's also hovering Braum first and, first pick and same in his. So I know I'm on his team. If you want to ban out, and this is actually one of the biggest problems with showing champion select, is people will ban out all of the champions that are being hovered by the team that the streamer is on. I'm particularly aware of this as a Braum one trick because when there are streamers in my game in Master GM and Challenger now, when there are streamers in my game who show champion select or do not put a long enough delay on it, if I hover Braum, they will be able to target ban Braum because they're watching their stream. and that really sucks. And this doesn't fix it because you can't hide from the streamer what champions their teammates are hovering. That's important information. So if people can still see what role everyone has, which you also have to show the streamer no matter what, because that's also important, pertinent information. They have to know what role they're playing, what role other people are playing, and they have to know what champions people are hovering. So the problem is you're still going to be able to identify whether you're on the same team as the streamer or the enemy team from the streamer very, very easily. And then you're just, all you have to do is ban the champions if you're against them that their teammates are hovering, same as before. How do you identify if you get into game with the streamer? Well, you'll just know even from before based on the timing. It's just that you hit accept at the same time, or if you know that they have around a certain delay, that maybe 30 seconds after you see that their queue pops and they accept or whatever. And so, you could never see before what the names were of the people on the enemy team. I guess this would help with, let's say I wasn't hovering Braum, but they could see that it was BenTbeyondrepair on the other team and they banned Braum. So I guess it would help a little bit with that, but I just feel like it's lackluster. And if it gives streamers the impression that but maybe they're not this stupid, but if it gives streamers the impression that, hey, you don't need to hide champion select because now there's a streamer mode, when in reality, it's actually worse. Streamers still need to just hide champion select, especially in high elo, and this streamer mode isn't going to do all that much. That's my only point there, is obviously they needed to do more with this, and maybe it's just impossible to make a streamer mode that actually works for League when you have to give that streamer relevant information about what their teammates are playing, what champions they're hovering. So the streamers just need to hide their champion select, and if they still need to hide it, don't make something like this that encourages them to not hide it because they think they have a setting that fixes it when it doesn't. So that's kind of the problem with that, but I don't think the streamers are that dumb. Systems attack speed cap. So obviously the attack speed cap, like we talked about, is going up from 2.5 to 3. Again, this isn't going to have an impact until in the vast majority of your games, well after 20, 30 minutes. And so as big of a crazy fundamental change to the game as this is, it's really not something that's going to change the outcome in a lot of games this patch or in the near future, except for maybe a handful of champions like Yi and Kog'Maw that can reach this cap much earlier, and or being able to get there consistently is really nice for them. Those champions will probably be tuned back in the next patch, or maybe even hotfixed depending on how busted they are. And we'll move on and everyone will forget about this change. So it's one of those things where your initial reaction is, wow, that's really crazy. And then you think about it and it's like, okay, the impact's not that big. Don't worry about it too much. But this is nice. It could, they said it theoretically could increase DPS by up to 20% for 80 carries. That feels really, really nice in the late game. So I really love to see that. It's a whole nother topic, so I don't want to delve into it too much, but I think League of Legends has lost its identity a little bit. And when I say that, one of the reasons why I say that is because the role identity used to be that 80 carry was, going to have the most impact on a game by hard carrying the game. And jungle was not the role that had the most impact on the outcome of the game. I think as people have gotten better at League and realized how important it is to be able to move around the map and make plays happen, people have kind of realized that 80 carries are actually very, very weak early, and the attack speed cap thing we talked about, not having a lot of agency early in lane because supports dictate the lane in bot lane, not 80 carry champions, because their tools are very weak. They even do less damage than supports, even than a Braum and an all-in in early levels. So all of the power and tools are in support and jungle's hands. And I feel like it's just because people have gotten better at the game. It's not that anything crazy fundamentally changed, but support and jungle are just too powerful of roles. And we've moved away from 80 carry being the singular carry role in the game. And I think that that's really bad for the identity of League of Legends. I've described it before like this. In football, not all roles are created equal, right? You have the quarterback, and the quarterback has a lot of agency and ability to make decisions, plays, and carry the team, right? When I used to think about AD carry in League, your AD carry was supposed to be that star player, like a quarterback, was supposed to be the one that everybody protected, that carried team fights, and that won games through, sheer mechanical prowess. And nowadays, all of the inherent traits to jungle and support actually enable jungle and support, which are probably supposed to be the two most supportive roles in the game, to have the most impact on the game because they're the ones that are actually free to go and make plays all over the map because they don't have to worry too much about gold and XP and that sort of thing. Well, not that you don't ever have to worry about it at all. You do, but obviously jungle is designed with more free time in mind to be able to go out and make those plays, and support maybe even more so to an extent, but jungle is also very, very important. So the game has become much more centered around jungle and support, and as a result of jungle and support having much more influence on the outcome of a game, AD carry, as well as other roles like mid and top, but AD carry has taken a backseat. And that feels really bad as an AD carry player because you're demonstrating some of the highest level of mechanics of any player on the team. And yet you're not in control as much as other people are, despite having, in a lot of ways, mechanically gotten better at the game than other people and other roles. And so it feels a little bit unfair to not have that agency. Riot had talked before a lot about trying to make roles equal to each other, like role parity. And I think that that's ridiculous because not all roles are created equal, like I said. I think that support should be a low income role. I don't think that support items should be as cheap and powerful as they are. And I don't think jungle should be as powerful as it is and be able to impact the map as much as it is. And neither should supports. So, you'd have to come up with a lot of changes and really brainstorm how to fix that specifically. Obviously, this is a step in the right direction, but I just wish, especially as a support, like a real support player who's fine with having a low income and who wants the game to be about my AD carry playing the game well. Maybe it's a Braum mains mentality, but I want my AD carry to be the one to carry the game, and my job is to protect them as a support, get them through laning phase, get them CS and XP and some kills along the way, and protect that person in team fights. And when the game feels like it's not being dictated by my AD carry at all, and the optimal play is often to just leave my AD carry and go play with my jungler, that feels like something's wrong with League of Legends and its identity as a game. And if you mained AD carry, that's a very committed choice, right? Like you've committed when you choose your role, and people have been playing this game for a long time, you've committed years and years and years to playing and getting better at your role. And for your role's identity to suddenly take a backseat to a role that wasn't supposed to be like that feels really bad, because now all of a sudden you have people who picked AD carry 10 years ago because they wanted to be that person on their team. They wanted to be the quarterback of the team. They wanted to be the one carrying the games. And now all of a sudden they're taking a backseat to like their own support and their jungler in terms of influence on the game. And I think that that's not good. I think that there should be roles that have less impact on the game. And honestly, if you think about type of people who choose support, the people who actually want to have the least agency in the game and want to rely on other people the most in order to carry the game or to win through protecting them are support players. So why would support should be the least influential role in the game? And that's again coming from a challenger support player. That's just the role's identity. It should be the least influential role in the game. That's just the way that it is. So that's a whole rant that sort of has to do with the attack speed cap, but you know what I mean. So I wish Riot would kind of rethink, what is the identity of jungle? What is the identity of support? What is the identity of mid? What is the identity of top? What is the identity of AD carry? They've screwed a lot of it up. Jungle has so much ability to gank that rather than top lane being about being a 1v1 island, top lane is almost exclusively about where is the enemy jungler and who's camping who. So top lane, if you're a top laner, you just chose top lane because you wanted to 1v1 and be on an island, fighter versus fighter or whatever. Top lane sucks because jungle has too much influence. Even as a jungler, depending on why you chose jungle and when. But a lot of people who signed up for jungle maybe did sign up for jungle as more of a supportive role and didn't want to be the main carry on their team, didn't want to rely on getting ahead in order for their team to have a decent shot at winning the game. A lot of people wanted to play utility junglers and, gank to help their team, but gank to help their team maybe less frequently as the game allows, but now the game allows you to do it too much and to have too much gold and XP, all this stuff, right? So I don't think that jungle's identity is quite right either, because again, in my opinion, jungle should be the second most supportive role in the game. And if jungle is the primary role for carrying games through and having influence on games, that doesn't make sense. Mid lane should all be about roaming, because you're in the center of the map. A lot of the champions that are commonly played mid lane are based around wave clear and that sort of thing. So mid lane was always for years and years and years about clearing waves and roaming to bot or top and trying to have influence on the outcome of the game that way. And mid lane's not about that anymore, because they changed the way that the minions worked. And the change where they made it so that now the minions ramp up to 14 minutes or whatever to enable some roaming later on is better than nothing. But they really, with those minion changes, completely changed the entire identity of mid lane from being, clear and roam to like you're just stuck in mid lane. And stuff like that. And obviously support is having way too much influence on the outcome of the games as a role that should be the least. And the item power creep in support is crazier than any other role by far. Supports back in the day used to have like sight stone, they had a little bit of health and they had their wards and that was it. And now you're getting like 2 or 3 legendary items that are like as powerful, if not more powerful than like the 80 carries items. Like, the amount of damage they're healing and shielding and stuff like that is the equivalent. Like if you compare like what damage you do with a Blade of the Ruin King in a team fight versus like a Redemption or a Locket or a Knight's Vow, Locket, Redemption, Knight's Vow beats Blade of the Ruin King's output in a lot of team fights, and that's just kind of crazy. So especially when the items are 1,000 gold cheaper than Blade of the Ruin King or other items that you might compare it to. So supports items are too powerful. They need to be tied to lane more in terms of XP. It should be more punishing to roam. You should roam more sparingly or something like that, in the same way that jungle ganks need to be reduced. So jungle ganks need to be reduced. Support roaming needs to be reduced somehow, tied to XP or something like that. Punish people more for roaming so that they only roam at really good times instead of just being able to kind of permanently roam like 70% of the time. All of these things. And then obviously 80 carry, right? 80 carry is supposed to be the primary role that carries the game. It's kind of in the name. And we just don't see that. Instead, I see 80 carries getting one shot by everything in the game. They are completely like low on the totem pole for impact that they can have on the game. They're maybe 4th, maybe top lane's worse in terms of impact, but they're right there with top lane at like 4th or 5th, because 80 carries tied to the lane because they got to get the gold and XP, and they're more gold reliant champions than any other role in the game, which means they have to CS, which means if anything goes wrong, their game gets set further behind than anybody else in terms of them being able to CS. It means when they get turret dove or pushed off of their tower, they get put further behind than any role in the game. It means if their support sucks, right, because support dictates the lane and is able to have influence on the game through roaming, all of a sudden as an 80 carry, you're shit out of luck, right? So that's really bad. So on top of all of that, right, your items are super expensive, and you're oftentimes, it feels like 80 carry is more about baiting out abilities from the enemy team in a team fight without dying. Like, here, let the Malphite flash at me, and then I'll flash the Malphite ult so that we waste Malphite ult. Like, that's your job as AD carry in most team fights. It's like, I'm a target, I'm a bait, and I just need to bait them to come into me while positioning just well enough or knowing my tools just well enough on my champion to survive them all inning me. And if I survive them all inning me and then run away and never get to hit anyone in a team fight, that's a successful team fight most of the time on AD carry. So AD carry is way more about baiting out abilities in a team fight than hitting anyone. And that, to me, says that the identity of the role is in crisis. The other thing is you also have, and Riot mentioned this themselves, look at the champions that are being played in AD carry. When you have Ashe and Jhin and these utility champions being played in AD carry, it usually is indicative of the fact that the AD carry as a role is in trouble, and is more about that baiting and then providing something to your team somehow through your champion rather than actually hitting anyone. So you see Ashe, Jhin, other supportive AD carry champions are like Sivir and Varus, and you actually do see Sivir is pretty rare, but I definitely see more Sivir nowadays than I did before. And Varus you see a ton of as well, as Ashe and Jhin. So that that tells you a lot. When there's not a lot of hyper carries and there's a lot of utility AD carry champions, that usually tells you a lot too. And yes, there are some hyper carry AD carry champions that are doing well. Like, for example, Jinx is doing pretty well, but I think that's more on an individual champion basis. Like, she's just a strong champion, and the way that they buffed her passive to be able to, stack her passive 5 times. I mean, that's such a crazy change, and for that to just make her relevant again and not completely break her as a champion should tell you how bad hyper carries are doing right now in AD carry. And then sure, Kog'Maw's doing well so far on this patch because of the attack speed cap being increased or whatever, but it took a game-breaking kind of change that very, very specifically helped him to get him into a reasonable, good position. So there you go. So I did do the other video in this one. We'll move on to the next thing, but there's your rant about the roles identity being kind of screwed up in League. Champion bounties. So they're continuing on from the last patch, which is last patch they basically said it's super hard to 1v9 games if you're on the losing team. So we're going to make it easier to do that by making it harder to get a bounty if you're on the team that's behind, basically. So the lead required to begin positive bounty suppression has been decreased by 60%. The lead to fully remove the lead required to fully remove bounties from the losing team is decreased by 33%, and once objective bounties spawn, champion bounties are now fully suppressed for the losing team. So this last one is at least comprehensible, so let me talk about this one. So once you get like turret bounties and stuff like that, it's not possible anymore for you to have a champion bounty at all as the losing team. So that is really, really nice. Especially if you were like actually 1v9 and you had like a gigantic bounty, and now all of a sudden if your team has lost a bunch of turrets or something like that, you just have no bounty. It just disappears. So that's really nice. I'm not quite sure what these first two mean exactly. But I'm assuming because of the direction they said the change was in, that, obviously these are just going to make it a lot harder to get a bounty if your team is behind or if you're behind. But I'm not quite sure exactly what they mean. It's a little bit unclear when I read them. So the lead required to fully remove bounties from the losing team has been decreased by 33%. So, I mean, this one's pretty easy to understand, I think. So the lead that the winning team has, that's what's a little bit confusing about it. The lead that the winning team has can be 33% less, and it'll still remove bounties from the losing team. So, that's quite significant, right? 33%. So they basically cut the lead that's required to remove champion bounties from the losing team by 33%. The lead required to begin positive bounty suppression. So positive bounty suppression would be if you're on that losing team, but you have a champion bounty. But that starts getting suppressed if the other team has a lead. Your champion bounty, if you're doing well, gets suppressed if the other team has a lead. And the lead required to begin doing that has been decreased by 60%. So that's going to be particularly even more impactful, not just for everybody's bounties, but for a specific player who has maybe a high bounty but is on a very losing team. That's the lead that the enemy team needs to have for that bounty suppression to start kicking in, being 60%, more than half lower is pretty big. So this is going to feel really nice for trying to 1v9 games and that sort of thing. Chemtech Soul. Chemtech is currently the worst performing Dragon Soul of them all, so we're giving it some needed power so it can feel a little bit more impactful compared to its Soul siblings. Below 50% health buff, 11% increased damage and damage reduction to 13% increased damage and damage reduction. So they're not like reworking it or anything crazy. It's just a 2% increased damage and damage reduction when you have the soul. So that should help its numbers a little bit, but that doesn't sound too crazy. So that seems like fine. Cloud Soul. Cloud Soul is currently the best by both data and perception in high skill play, and we're nerfing its passive movement speed as it's quite difficult to answer once acquired. So the movement speed gain is going from 20% to 15%. So fair enough. They're just trying to balance out the Dragon's Souls a little bit. Again, Dragon Soul is something that usually the team that's getting it is already winning the game one way or another anyways, so I don't think it has a huge impact. It's also something that you often don't get in a lot of games because it's coming much later on into the game. So I really don't think it's that big of a change. It's also, just 2 Dragon Souls in particular, and they're very light changes to the best and the worst Dragon Souls, so not that big of a deal, but should help bring them in line a little bit more. But it's not, it doesn't change anything about the way that you behave really, because you're not going to go for or not go for soul or something like that based off of these changes. Obviously you're getting it if you can get it, and you're not getting it if you can't. Void grubs. We believe that void grubs are currently too valuable. This is very true. One of the things that has been really, really bothering me is that I feel pressured nowadays as a support to move to every single void grub spawn, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like the old scuttle crab problem. I don't know why they thought this would be a good idea to basically add the same thing. But the problem is that in a game of League, when you understand how to win solo queue games, what you have to understand is that I used to have a mentality that's there's sort of a contradiction here, but I'll explain it. So you might think, because I've said before, and people tend to think this way, that you have the most control in your own lane because it's a 1v1 or a 2v2. So taking fights in your lane where you have the most control over the outcome is a better way to control the outcome of games, like win lane, win game, right? And that is very true. However, if you do not participate in fights when fights are occurring, you're going from having that 25% impact as, one of the 4 people participating in the fight, or 20% impact if it's a full 5-man team fight or something like that. You're giving that impact up, and potentially if your team ends up being outnumbered, literally just like griefing and losing them the fight because you're not there. And so the issue is that in solo queue, you kind of have to assume that my team is going to make the wrong decision and fight if I choose to not be there. And so, and this applies especially to low elo actually, is just because the correct play is to go farm somewhere else or deal with something else or set up a wave here or go do this objective there, if your team is committed and showing that they are going to go somewhere and fight, and you are choosing to not participate in that, unless you're sure that what you're getting is really worth potentially sacking your team on the other side of the map, or you really think they can handle it themselves, you have to be very cautious with that, because you're giving up all of the influence that you could have on that fight by not choosing not to participate. So it's not about the void grubs it's not about, like, the reason why I go up isn't necessarily just for the void grubs. It's because as a support, if I don't go up and their support does go up, then the fight is lost. And I know that my team, even at a high level, will always choose to fight, even if they're outnumbered, over the void grubs. That's the problem. And of course, that's tied to the power of the void grubs, because if there's a perception that the void grubs are too powerful or they are really powerful, then that's why people will choose to fight no matter what more often. But honestly, people don't know how powerful this stuff is. They just fight over everything regardless, especially in solo queue, especially the lower rank you go. So the problem is that you're forced to participate in a skirmish or a fight constantly every game that you don't want to be involved in, that doesn't make sense. But you don't have a choice because your team is going to all in over it, and that's going to decide the early game, and it's going to decide maybe the whole pace of the game. So you have to be there. And that really, really sucks. And it makes the game actually very, very boring and static, considering the game is supposed to be such a dynamic game with so many champions that can play out so many different ways. Because in solo queue, especially in my high-elo games, the game plays out the exact same way every single game. It's like I lane into level 4.5 exactly. I recall, I get boots, ruby crystal, and refillable pot, and I run straight at the void grubs, and we fight it as 4. Well, our 80 carries sit bot, and we either win the fight at grubs and the game's won, or we lose the fight at grubs and we mute up and we try to somehow come back into the game. Should we actually be committing 4 people to team fighting over the void grubs at, level 4.5 or whatever? No. But like, obviously it'd be more efficient for the top laners and the mid laners to just farm and push and get plates and all this jazz, but it is what it is. That feels like how it goes most of these games. So it's just ridiculous. And it was the same thing back when Scuttle Crab, the first Scuttle Crab spawn, was really important and really highly contested. Is people would get dragged into like level 2, level 3, 3-man, 4-man skirmishes and team fights at Scuttle Crab, because it wasn't that, it was good, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And junglers refused to lose that Scuttle Crab and give it up. So now everybody's having to brawl in the river over the Scuttle Crab. And it was just a disaster, So same thing happening with Void Grubs, right? You put too much power in there at too early of a point into the game too, before people really feel like they should be grouping. And all of a sudden you get players who are just never grouping for it. And even if that's the correct decision, they're being held back because now all of a sudden they're not impacting or leaving their team constantly outnumbered in a fight that really shouldn't be happening every game. Or you do go and you fight it, and it's just like, okay, why are we coin flipping every game over Void Grubs? So we believe that Void Grubs are too valuable. On initial spawn, health and attack damage update immediately instead of at 6:04. Alongside with ensuring that they correctly update their health and attack damage on spawn. I don't quite know what that means. It didn't really say if that was more health and more attack damage or not. Buff structured damage per stack. 8 or 4 every 1 second for 4 seconds. To 6 or 3 every 1 second for 4 seconds. I'm trying to figure out what they mean by the 8/4. Oh, this must be melee versus ranged? Is that what that is? I'm going to look this up because I'm really not sure. Bear with me here. We gotta know. This is the whole change, and I don't understand the first part either. So we gotta look it up here. So what is it? What is the buff? Okay, so it gives you. Oh, we need to know what the buff is. Touch of the Void is what we actually want to be looking at. Okay, so 3 to 18. So there is a different amount of damage between ranged and melee. But these numbers are way different than... Oh, this is at the different amount of stacks. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this was 3 for melee, 1 stack, and 1.5. Yeah, so I believe this is going to be for melee, and this one's going to be for ranged. Burn for 4 seconds deals. Eight to 4. I actually just have no idea. Oh, well, here we go. Okay, maybe this is more comprehensible, okay? The damage per tick was increased. I think the confusion is because this is showing per tick, whereas this is showing, per second. So the damage per tick, which is every 0.5 seconds it's doing it, the damage per tick is going from 4 to 24 if you're melee to 3 to 18 per stack. So that is, in terms of a percentage decrease, that's 25% decrease. And same thing here, 25% decrease. So the effect would be that, let's say the true damage burn that you're doing to towers, let's say you had 4 void grubs. Now it would feel like you had 3. Or, if you had 6, it would feel like you have... What would that even be? Uh-oh. Like 3.5, is that right? Something like that. $4.5. So if you had 6, it would feel like 4.5. And if you had 4, it would feel like 3. So that's kind of in your brain how you can think about it. So let's see, 6 to 4.5 and 4 to 3. It's a little bit hard to tell because you got the Void Might damage in there too, though, for getting it. So, it's a little bit hard for me to imagine in my head just how much the true damage burn to the turret is doing. But that's, it matters, but I don't know that it's going to stop people from changing the way that they play around this. So that's kind of an issue. But I don't know. I mean, what can they do about it? I don't know. Honestly, they might want to just get rid of void grubs. I hate to say it because, maybe some people enjoy it or find it fun. I really think that void grubs add a lot of volatility to the early game, and I'd really like to just see it gone. With the addition of Atakhan, I think there's enough objectives in the game that we could get back to basics and kind of chill. I think Void Grub's time has come to an end. It is what it is. But, I mean, they can make their decision on that. Atakhan. Okay, so we're making changes to Atakhan again. Voracious Atakhan's win rate impact actually managed to go up over the last patch despite the nerfs. Maybe I'm having a hard time remembering, but I don't know that they did a lot to nerf Voracious Atakhan last patch. I thought they mostly targeted the GA version. So we're adding a few more on, including increasing the time it takes for players to get back onto the map when their false life withdrawal triggers. Extra gold. Oh. This is Voracious. I see the names always get me. This is the GA Atakhan. So they're continuing. I've been saying that the forget what it's called, but the other Atakhan that spawns the rose petals after it dies, that one's way better than the GA thing. So I'm pretty sure that like Voracious Atakhan already kind of sucks a little bit. But okay. So they're decreasing the extra gold earned whenever you get a takedown from 40 to 25. So that's massive because they're really reducing that by almost half. The withdrawal now fully heals you as opposed to only healing your base health. Okay, so that actually helps you get back faster, but obviously not by this much of a duration. So false life, and that's just weird. I mean, that almost seems like that was a bug that they're just fixing for like tanks. Obviously, that wouldn't have mattered if you weren't playing a champion that has bonus health. False life withdrawal stasis duration is going up from 5.5 seconds to 15 seconds. So rather than, getting back to base fairly quickly after you die, it's going to take a while. And so, this is going to act almost like a death timer anyways. But I don't know. I mean, again, I feel like they should be targeting the other Atakhan, but maybe they have data suggesting that that's not the case. But the amount of gold worth of stats that you get from the other one is absolutely bonkers. So I don't know. They're continuing to target Voracious Atakhan, but and these are some pretty hefty changes. But they're not that big of a deal. But they're significant. Champions, Cassiopeia. Q damage decreased, W damage decreased. Cassio was a strong performer before feats of strength, and she's still excellent after her recent nerf. Yep. We'd like to preserve her ability to take a few hits as mid-range battle mage and preserve Twink Fane as much as possible, but we don't want to weaken her already poor laning phase. Okay, so 75 to 215 to 75 to 215, but minus 5% AP. Not a huge deal. W miasma damage per second 20 to 40 to 20 to 40, but from 15% AP to 10. I'm assuming this means percent, 10 AP, but I'm sure this is percent. So they just took 5% AP off of her W and 5% AP off of her Q. This is really not that big of a nerf. It's really not that big of a deal. It's one of those funny situations, I think, with Cassiopeia where I think she was actually really decent and good for a long time. But then the fact that she got that, extra bonus movement speed to her passive through feats of strength made people, and then she became broken because those numbers weren't balanced on her passive and she was gaining too much movement speed if she got feats of strength. That reminded people about the champion, and even once they walked those changes back, she still remained a good champion that people were playing. But her W is not like a spammy ability. It's something that you don't cast as frequently as her other abilities, and it's only 5% AP, so it's not going to matter, like they said, until later, until you have a ton of ability power. I mean, again, think about this. It's like, okay, so you're losing 5 damage for every 100 ability power you have, but it's not like she's even like most mages nowadays. It's not like their ability power totals are crazy anyways. Her W is a long cooldown compared to other abilities, and it's only 5% AP. 5% AP on her Q hurts a little bit more, but again, just not that big of a deal. So it's like, okay, when you have 100 AP, you lose 10 damage. When you have, 200 AP, you're losing 20. I guess more if you use Q multiple times, but it's not really that bad. So that's fine for Cassio. E damage increased. 55 to 115 to 60 to 180. So they're increasing this a little bit early, and then it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is quite a huge base damage increase because they're increasing it by 65 at rank 5. But I mean, when do you max this? You probably max like Q on Evelyn, I would assume, but I don't really know. So maybe this isn't doing a whole lot depending on when you max this. And then you're going 3% target max HP plus 1.5% AP. So this is the same. Empowered damage, 75 to 175 to 80 to 240. So that's getting increased, let's see, as well. They increased the first one by 65 base damage, I believe. And this one is going up by also 65 base damage. So nothing special for the empowered damage. What about for the AP ratio? AP ratio and max health all the same on the empowered one as well. So she's just getting a lot of extra damage, a lot of extra base damage on her E once it's maxed. But again, if Evelyn's maxing Q first, and so she's getting 5 extra damage when she's hitting like level 10 or something like that, or level 9 or whatever, or level 8, like, are we really doing a whole lot? And then it's like, okay, you get 65 extra damage on your E, but it doesn't really come into play until like your level, what, like 11, 12, 13, like the game's already over, buddy. Galio base health decreased. Okay, Galio's going down from 632 to 600 health. Very straightforward change. Galio is doing really well right now. Seems like a totally fine change. Kayn Q damage increased. Okay. So they're saying this again, that Shadow Assassin Kayn is the weaker option right now. So I think this was similar last patch. They're ramping up his Q damage now. So he's going 75 to 155 to 75 to 175. I believe this is just base though. But of course Shadow Assassin Kayn does extra damage. So if if this does more, it'll do more for Shadow Kayn than it will for Rost, but this is going to affect Rost as well. So, there's that. But okay, so they're, and it is his most maxed ability. Rank 1, it does nothing. Rank 2, you're getting 5, and then you're slowly ramping up to plus 20, which is significant on an ability that you use quite a lot on Kayn. But not crazy. So I think this is a fine change, and that's okay. Jax. But I said this last time about Kayn, I'll say it again. I've seen Shadow Assassin Kayn, even in some high elo games, doing totally fine. So, and I haven't seen Rost in years. So I don't know where Riot's getting this from. I don't know if something's going on in low elo with Kayn. I don't know what's going on. But, now two patches in a row, he's getting significant buffs. And it's like, okay, at what point does Kayn... Because Kayn's one of those champions that's like modern champions that kind of breaks the rules of the game, can gank you from like every different angle that is possibly imaginable and makes it really annoying to play against. And I don't know that we want to see, like, why does Riot really want this champion to come back into the meta? That's kind of what I'm wondering, when he seems decent to me. And that's as a high elo player, and I'm pretty sure Kayn is one of these kind of pub stompy champions that's even better in low elo. Jax is getting a little bit of health growth, a little bit of base mana regen. That's all sounds fine. His R 3-hit damage is going up a little bit, so that's really nice. It's going up by 5, then 10, and then 15. But of course, you're not getting this. This is with points in ult, so you're not getting this until much, much later. AP ratio is staying the same here. So you're not getting that until much, much, much later. So, 5 extra damage, it helps a little bit. These are all a bunch of nice little changes, but they don't really help him a ton. Okay, Jayce. So Jayce, if you didn't know, was being abused with Fimbulwinter, where people would go... Actually forget what the first item, but I think they went like Eclipse or something normal like that, or maybe they went some damage item, and then they would go Fimbulwinter, and they'd still do a really good amount of damage because Jayce had really good base damage, and his first item would give him a lot of damage, but then getting Fimbulwinter second meant that he was extremely healthy and tanky, and also makes you kind of an unstoppable split pusher, because Jayce is such a strong split pushing champion, but now that he has all that HP, he can just ignore you and take turrets in some cases. So essentially they just buffed Jayce's base damage too much. And so now they're tuning Jayce's base damage back without touching Fimbulwinter. So this is really only a problem on this one champion. So they're reducing his base damage to incentivize him to build AD. to compensate, not just hurt him overall, though they're buffing his AD ratios. So they're removing his base AD on his abilities and adding bonus AD scaling. So, so essentially what this is going to do is if you build tank Jayce, you're not going to have as much damage as before, hopefully by a significant amount. And if you build AD, you'll be hopefully mostly power neutral. So his Q is going from 60 to 310 base to 60 to 285. So it's losing what, like 25 at rank 5. I believe this is his first max ability, so that's going to be important. And it looks like it's, it's going up 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, something like that. And then he's getting 15% bonus AD ratio to kind of compensate for that. His Q in range form is getting the same treatments, going from 60 to 335 to 60 to 310. So it's getting hit by 25 again at the end, but it's gaining plus 15% bonus AD. His W lightning field's going from 40 to 115 base to 35 to 110 base, so it's losing a little bit as well, like 5 at all ranks. AP ratio is the same because, hopefully we're not building AP Jayce. And then R empowered basic attack damage from 25 to 145 based on level to 25 to 130 based on level. So that's going down, but instead of 25% bonus AD, that's 30% bonus AD. So when he transforms, his next auto attack ranged is going to do extra damage. But hopefully now, like I said, this is just going to incentivize people to go back to building AD. Misfortune, armor growth decreased by 3, or armor decreased by 3, armor growth decreased by 0.2. Yeah, Misfortune's been doing pretty well as well. So they're just, tuning her back a little bit. Not a crazy change or anything like that, but makes her a little bit more vulnerable, especially as a fairly immobile champion. Losing that armor can be quite punishing if you're not good at the champion and you open up in the wrong places and stuff like that at the wrong time. So that's fine, but nothing major. Passive lifesteal increased for Nasus. It's going from 9 to 21% on his passive to 12 to 24%. So 3% at all levels that he would have, increasing his passive. That's actually pretty nice. It's actually really nice. 3% feels pretty nice. Quinn W attack speed increased from 28 to 60% to 28 to 80%. I mean, that seems pretty nice too, but again, like all these other ones, question like, well, when do you max W on Quinn? Because W to me on Quinn strikes me as maybe even the last ability maxed or something like that. So if you're sitting at 28 the whole time, this is more of a placebo change, and it doesn't even come into effect until you're hitting like level 13 or whatever, and then you go from 36% attack speed to 41%, and you're like whoop-de-doo, So that's kind of the problem with some of these changes. But I mean, if she's not doing that well or something like that, I mean, I guess it helps a little bit, so that's fine. Rakan W cooldown decreased at early ranks. Okay, fair enough. 16 to 10 to 14 to 10. Not a huge change, but definitely a nice little change for Rakan to help him. I agree, Rakan has been underperforming a little bit recently for sure. And they're also talking about accessibility for a lot of players, and I agree with that. I think he's kind of a hard champion to get into. He shouldn't really be, but he's kind of hard to get into. So it's just he actually has a lot of tools and is a really safe champion, because if you use his E properly to get out, it's very hard on a support with 3 dashes that can all be used out. Plus his ult, which can also be used to run away, or to do something with it and then use the rest of the movement speed to run away. It seems like a champion that would be hard to die on, but a lot of times people are using all those things to go in, especially if you're lower rank or you're learning the champion, not playing it that well. So that's kind of what they're getting at there is we need to show the champion a little bit of love because people are struggling with him. Rell, thank God, I've been perma banning this champion. Riot's finally answered. Rell's power has swung a bit back and forth the last few months, but she's currently the #1 support for most League players. This is exactly what I said. All of the high elo support players, except me, because I'm the best and I'm a Braum player. All of these high elo support players that you see at the top are all playing these same champions over and over and over again. And it is Rell and it is Nautilus non-stop. And Nautilus goes under the radar constantly because of the fact that he is the #1 most picked support if you're auto-filled support. And because of that, Nautilus has a very low win rate, or at least a somewhat low win rate. But if you look, all of the highest ranked challenger players on support all play Rell Nautilus constantly. That's it. And it's to the point where I'm sitting here and I'm playing Braum, and I don't know when this happened, but I'm playing Braum versus Rell, versus Nautilus, and versus Leona. And these are all champions that Braum should beat. When Leona E's into Braum, or a Rell W's into Braum, or a Nautilus Q's into Braum, Braum has always and is supposed to kill them for doing that. Because Braum is a premier counter-engage Guardian support champion. And so when these champions have historically engaged on Braum, even if they got their abilities off first, Braum would win those fights. He would win those extended fights because he'd throw his passive on them. And once he got to start hitting and applying his passive and stuff like that with his AD carry, it depends on the AD carry matchup and stuff like that too in the situation in the game. But all else being equal, if a Leona or a Rell or whatever comes into Braum, they should lose. I don't know if it's something with Aftershock or just with some of these specific champions just being too strong. But even champions like Leona, they just never lose anymore versus Braum. And so the hardest matchups I'm facing, I've been complaining for years about enchanter items and how good enchanters are and how poke supports, like mages and stuff like that shouldn't even be in support because all those matches suck for Braum. So my #1 go-to hard matchups for Braum were always like Karma, Senna. For years I've been banning Karma or Senna or something like that. But now, especially in high elo where I'm playing against people who are less likely to play those champions, much more likely to play engaged supports like Rell and Nautilus, I'm much more concerned about playing against a Rell than I am concerned about playing against a Karma or a Senna or any of those champions. So it's just, it's kind of ridiculous that as Braum, and I showed this before, I'll actually show it again here. It's crazy because, if we go to my op.gg and let's just look at the matchup history. Let's take a look at last season. Okay, here's last split. My most played matchup I'm playing against Lulu 18 times and winning 56% of my games. But versus a champion like Rell, what's going on here? Where is Rell? I'm not even seeing it. Okay, here. What was that we were just looking at? It was like it was bugged. It showed completely different stats. I was going to say I had a much better win rate versus Lulu. But anyways, okay, so look at this. My most played matchups were, and I get this is kind of a small sample size, but I'm telling you this is indicative of something going on here. How come my most played matchups are Lulu and Karma, right? Because they've counterpicked me. Yet I'm 14-6 versus Lulu and 10-5 versus Karma. Yet when I play against Leona, I'm 5-8. When I play against Nautilus, I'm 5-5. And when I play against Rell, I'm 2-8. So I get that these are kind of small sample sizes, but I'm telling you, I can feel it in the matchup too. Something is wrong because traditionally Braum is supposed to beat Leona, he's supposed to beat Nautilus, he's supposed to beat Thresh, he's supposed to beat Rell. But I'm losing way more games to these champions than I am to Lulu and Karma. And I don't know if it's just the players who are playing Lulu and Karma are awful And the players who actually play engaged support champions like Leona, Rell, Nautilus, or actually Thresh are just good players, which, you know, to a certain extent, that's certainly true. But it's also that, like, when a Leona comes into me, good player or not, it's very straightforward. Leona EQs me. I throw my Q while her E is going off, and she gets tagged with the passive before I even get stunned up. And my AD carry starts pumping on the Leona. I take a little bit of burst damage initially from the Leona passive and their AD carry hitting me and me being CC'd, but then we start the chase down and we should be winning. That would be what would have happened season 4 through, you know, what season we in? Season 15, maybe season 13 or something like that. But like the last year or two, for whatever reason, Braum loses versus Leona, Braum loses versus Rell, Braum loses versus Nautilus. It's completely counterintuitive because actually Braum should be losing lane to ranged champions like Lulu and Karma and then getting outscaled by them. And he should be winning versus a Leona or a Nautilus or Rell because they should have to get ahead in lane or do something in lane, and they should lose fights when they, even if they started and engage and hit their abilities, because Braum is supposed to counter those champions. For whatever reason, the opposite is happening. So I don't know what's going on there. It's not just Rell, it's just crazy. So health is going down by 20, and our armor growth is going down by 0.3. Obviously, that's not a huge change. They said they're delivering some fairly simple durability nerfs, as they were very effective last time, and they overshot, I guess, last time. So they're being cautious about it. I'd say something's wrong here. Something needs to be looked into with this, but I don't know what's going on with it. You know, the other thing it could be is that Braum's ult is completely useless. You know, we'll just put that out there. Like, the fact that Braum's ult is most optimal when you're ulting somebody who's super far away from you, when you're supposed to be the premier peeling champion, doesn't make any sense. You want your ult to be good on the people close to you. I know that if they were to immediately revert his ult back to the old version of his ult, where the circle around him that it knocked up was like a super long knock-up duration or something like that, he might be really, really strong. And they don't need to go that far. They can even nerf something else to compensate for it, but Braum's ult makes no sense whatsoever in his kit. It's just like completely useless, feels really bad. It's too slow for how long of a distance it travels, so it's like you can only ever ult when somebody else has CC'd them or you've hit them with Q first to slow them. It's, and 99% of the time if the other person has flash, they're just and hands, they're just flashing the ult anyways. So Braum's ult feels terrible in his kit. I'll just say that too. So that could be part of the problem, is that like very old Braum would have handedly dealt with Leona and Rell, and well, Rell didn't exist back then, but he would have dealt with these champions because his ult was stronger, and that could be part of the issue as well. I'll just throw that out there while we're talking about Braum. Samira E attack speed duration increased from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. That helps her a little bit, not a huge change. Very simple. Skarner armor growth 4.8 to 4.5. Very minor. Skarner is doing pretty well right now. The E stun duration 1.5 seconds to 1 second. That's a very healthy change. So that's good. Fairly light nerfs, but this can matter in a lot of situations. So I think this is a good change. Skarner's been doing really, really well. Passive max health bonus increased. So max health per soul fragment from 12 to 15. This is really dangerous because I think Swain's already pretty good. E damage from 80 to 240 to 80 to 240, but then 60% AP to 70% AP. So a 10% on his E as well, AP buff. These are pretty nice changes for Swain. Not the most gigantic in the world. I don't know about how many soul fragments he gets per game, but I mean, let me think here. So it's going up by 3. It's 4 3s in 12, right? And then there's 5 3s in 15. So we're going up by like 25%. So 25% increase to the amount of health Swain is going to get. That's a lot. Plus he's getting 10% AP on his E. That is a lot. That is a lot. And, his E isn't, his most spammed ability. That would probably be his Q. But I will say that his E is always the ability he's using to start a fight by pulling somebody off of his E. So it contributes, I would say, to his all-in potential a lot in a way that matters. So I don't know. This is all very scary. Teemo, they may have gone too far with this one. I think Swain was totally fine. But we'll see. Teemo E damage decreased 14 to 66 to 9 to 65. Wow, that feels absolutely terrible, doesn't it? 5? I mean, 5 off of 14, that's over a 33% decrease to his E on hit damage. Too good at bullying top lane. The AP ratio is staying the same. I think you do max E first on Teemo, top though. So should be okay. Because you recover to the point where you're not losing any damage, or you're losing 2 or you're losing 3 damage by the time you're like level 7, level 8 or so, level 9. That seems like a pretty hefty hit to Teemo. Is Teemo really that good too? Is that true? I don't know. I mean, I get it. Like, I mean, Tai G is challenger. He's a Teemo player. So there are some Teemo players in high elo, but like, I don't really think, other than dedicated one tricks who have very clearly gotten very good at the champion and are there because of their skill, not because Teemo is not a meta abusing champion, right? You don't see it Tai G or these challenger players who play Teemo and say to yourself, yep, that guy's here because he's abusing the meta. That's just one individual player who's good at his champion. So I don't really know where Teemo's broken, but hey, you guys in gold need to figure this stuff out. You guys got to learn how to play against Teemo. It's been 15 years, frankly. Okay, health on Thresh is going from 600 to 620. Okay, they were buffing Thresh. Base health increased, E damage increased. Thresh is cool, and we like it when he's good. You know how much that hurts me as a Braum player when I just mentioned that I'm like losing all these games to these champions that shouldn't be beating Braum. Like, Thresh is one of those matchups Braum should really be beating Thresh. He's got such a wide hitbox. It's so easy to hit Q on the guy. And, his entire kit is designed to like just engage on you, similar to these other champions. And it's like, if you hit Braum with a hook and flame, but then Braum returns passive and Q onto you, like, you should just die as Thresh over and over again. And yet for some reason, like, Thresh players are able to do that, and we're not killing him. We're not doing it. It's not working like the matchup normally used to. So when I see that all of a sudden we're buffing Thresh, and the reason why is because we like him, that feels a little bit rough, But honestly, I agree. Thresh is one of those champions that takes a lot of skill to play. He's one of the highest skill support champions to play. And a lot of people love the champion. It's one of the most popular support champions, especially amongst like human good support players. So I respect that, and I'm fine with Thresh being okay. But it feels a little bit bad for Braum, but it's fine. So he's getting 20 health, and then his E, he's going from 1.5 basic attack damage per soul to 1.7 per soul, up to 80 to 200%, to 90 to 210%. So not only is he getting extra damage, basic attack damage per soul that he's earned, but he's also the percentage that he's increasing his auto attack by from the flight passive, stacking up, is also going up by 10% at all ranks. So those are quite nice buffs. If they're actually just buffing him because he's cool and he was not in a bad spot before, these could make him quite decent. especially for good Thresh players that actually abuse E to poke level 1 and stuff like that versus other tanks. Viego, attack damage down by 3. That's fine. Viego has been performing well. That seems totally fine. Wukong, okay, we're finally getting to Wukong. Wukong is like the most busted champion I've seen in a while. Let's see. Wukong has recently risen to become king of the jungle. True. His W cooldown is going from 18 to 14 to 20 to 16. 2-second cooldown on his W is not going to fix it. E, attack speed, also not going to fix it. What? From 40 to 60% to 35 to 55%. So he's losing 5% attack speed when he E's at all ranks, and his W is a 2-second longer cooldown. This is not going to do anything whatsoever. And the fact that he's so strong makes me really disappointed in Riot for failing to nerf the champion properly. I'm reading now that they wanted to leave top lane Wukong unaffected because there's some people who main top lane Wukong. I haven't seen a top Wukong player since a long time ago, nearly a decade now, unironically. So, you know, I guess that's why they didn't touch his Q. I was just about to say, like, the reason why Wukong is strong and broken is because, like, his ult is giga strong and his Q is giga strong. And what are the two abilities that they hit? His W and his E, right? And they leave his main abilities alone. It's like they gave him knockup, three AoE knockups, because, you know, Wukong used to just get one ult, that was it. Now he can ult off of himself and his clone, and he can reactivate it a second time. Now you're not going to have the cooldown reduction to be able to spawn your clone a second time, hopefully, so I don't think you're able to get 4 off, but it's still just ridiculous. And knockups are the strongest form of CC because there's no way to reduce them. So, you know, his ult is just wild and crazy and very, very good. And then his Q just does too much damage. But if you don't want to affect top lane Wukong, how do you do that without hitting his Q? Maybe the reality is that top lane Wukong, you know, is just a worse version of Wukong than jungle Wukong. And it's gotta die if you want to rein in the jungle Wukong, because jungle Wukong has actually been busted like for a long time now. It's like a couple patches, he's been like by far and away the strongest jungler. Items, Bloodsong on support is performing a bit too well. Yes. Especially on champions like Poppy and Leona. Yes. Okay, maybe this will help with the thing I was just complaining about with these champions that keep killing me on Braum, like, that shouldn't. Leona should not be building Bloodsong. Nautilus should not be building Bloodsong. They very clearly should be building different items than that. And yet, you know, I have it in my item sets. I'm very familiar with Leona and Nautilus. Bloodsong outperforms like crazy on those champions compared to, because they have auto attack resets. They want to burst you in and all in. And so Bloodsong is just really, really good. And let's be honest, what is it called? Like, I don't even know what it's called. It's so bad I've almost never ever built it since the support items were introduced, this version of support items. Celestial Opposition or something, the one that makes it so that, you know, if you haven't been hit, as long as somebody doesn't break it first, you know, you go into combat, and then when you first get hit, you take a massive reduced amount of damage. That is, like, you would think on Leona and Nautilus that would be the best support item, but that item has been terrible forever, and so it's just never been built. You might even think, okay, well, you go like maybe Solstice Slay because they have a lot of CC to proc Solstice Slay, and maybe they even want like the healing when they're going in to give themselves some survivability as well. But Bloodsong has just been so good, it's just been outperforming them all. It's just crazy item. I feel like they've nerfed this like 7 times too, and it's still not done enough to make those basic champions change their support item. Expose weakness, increased damage taken, 10% melee, 5% range to 8% melee, 5% range, and the duration is from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. That's not enough. It will do almost nothing. But good try. Yeah. Again, you know how we were talking about like Wukong Q is like, you know, and his ult are like the main things that are driving him being good. One of the main things that's driving Bloodsong being good is the Sheen passive, is the damage that you get to do yourself after you've used an ability on your auto attack. Not just the increased damage that they take from champions afterwards. And to only nerf it by 2% is a tiny, tiny amount. Sure, the duration is down from 6 seconds to 4, but like in a lot of cases, if you're, 6 seconds out from when you hit the person with Bloodsong, you probably used a lot of your damage already anyways, and so it's probably not doing a whole lot. And a lot of times the person's just straight up burst and killed before, 4 seconds or 6 seconds anyways, so I don't think that makes a huge difference either. I mean, maybe it's a decent change in the right direction, but I don't think that that's going to solve that either. Zaz'Zak. Okay, I was going to read this because I was like, Zaz'Zak is not that good, so what are we doing here? We're looking to do a nerf to both Bloodsong and Zaz'Zak as a systematic push away from damage supports and to try to push players towards tanks and enchanters. Thank you. Thank the Lord. I've been asking for mages out of bot lane. Look, I want them out of AD carry as well, so that's a whole nother topic, obviously, that's not related to this. Get mages out of bot lane. I want to stop seeing mid lane champions and mages being played in support and being played in AD carry. It's actually ruining the game. It's like, especially if you're a Braum player, right? And you're trying to use your passive, and every other game in high elo, it's Hui, it's Lux, it's Swain, it's Karthus bot. I have, I have no champions that synergize with me whatsoever. It's Seraphine. It's so crazy. I've probably played with the Seraphine so many times now. I'm so used to playing with it. This is how bad it's gotten. It's to the point where I used to get frustrated maybe 2 years ago when I would play with Seraphine AD carry. It's to the point now where I've even given up on being frustrated. I'm just so used to playing the matchup that I'm actually like, oh, well, Braum Seraphine is actually really good, so I'll just, we're chilling. It's just really good, but I don't want it to be good. I want it out of my lane. That's all that there needs to be said about that. So they're decreasing the AP ratio by 5%. Not a huge change, but I'm actually more happy with this rather than this. Aiming for a small nerf to Zaz'Zak's Realspike, mostly as a placebo to disincentivize players from picking damage supports while not actually lowering its win rate too much, as it's already on the lower end, especially... Oh my god, Riot's trolling. If you're going to make a placebo nerf, don't tell people it's a fake nerf. I was going to say like 5% is not that big of a deal. Don't tell people. The whole point of the placebo is that they think it's a big nerf and they don't know any better. If you tell them that it's a placebo, maybe they don't read the patch notes anyways, it's fine. You don't tell them it's a placebo, you just put it in there. That's like you got cancer and the doctor comes to you and says, I've got a life-saving medicine for you, newly FDA approved medicine. Hello, I'm gone blurry again. Newly approved medicine. Here you go. And you're like, great, wonderful, I'm saved. Oh, by the way, it is a placebo. We're just testing it. So you're not actually getting the real version of the medicine. You're going to die. Sorry about that. Do you think that patient's going to have any shot at getting better? Hell no, they're dead. So like, what are we doing here by telling them that it's a placebo? That's crazy. They've gotten too in their this cycle of like listening to people like me talk about these changes and other people say that, and LS and everybody's talking about, they do like placebo changes and all the Q&As that they've done and stuff like that with these people, and now it's gone to their head and now they can't help themselves but saying what they think and leaking the deets. Okay, runes. Okay, so it's not just these support zombie runes and stuff like that, zombie ward or whatever. I don't even know what the new one, Deep Ward. It's not Deep Ward. They're done changing those ones, I guess, for now. Electrocute. Oh, so they're actually doing all of the major keystones. I'm particularly interested to see what they do with Hail of Blades, because I heard they were buffing Hail of Blades, and I think Hail of Blades is an option on Braum, and seeing what the buffs to it are might be really, really interesting. So Electrocute, 50 to 190 to 70 to 240. Holy moly, that is a big increase in damage. That is a really big increase in damage. That's really interesting. Dark Harvest, 20 to 30, plus 9 per soul to plus 11 per soul. That is also a big buff. It says that Dark Harvest is getting a similar buff to Electrocute, getting 50% more damage in the early game and 25% more damage from its scaling, making it a rune that requires early excellence in order to keep pace. So I guess they're just, for whatever reason, they feel like all of the keystones in the domination tree are just like not powerful enough, or could be more powerful. I guess fair enough. Okay, Hail of Blades. Why is the Hail of Blades picture tiny, by the way? Nice. We know that the cooldown buff will disproportionately affect ranged champions, so we're only bumping the attack speed for melee ones. Melee attack speed, 110% to 140%. Cooldown, 12 seconds to 10 seconds. It's not the biggest change in the world. The problem is that when you got a bajillion attack speed, I mean, maybe I'd have to feel it out in game, but I don't know that this much attack speed makes that much of a difference for like a Braum running Halo Blades. The problem as a melee champion is that it can be hard in practice in an actual game because you have to move, right? You have to move between your auto attacks, especially when you're a melee champion on top of somebody chasing them down. So usually, let's say you W in on Braum to one of your minions, you auto attack somebody, right? So now you proc Hail of Blades, now you have super fast attack speed. Even though you auto attack them, even though you have really high attack speed, you still have some duration where you can't auto attack in between. And you need to move during that time to get the most use out of it. And it's usually a little bit better to move more and be less efficient with your auto attack timing than to stand still and get your auto attack timing perfect but lose a lot of movement. And so you're not really attacking. No one can attack at 110% of attack speed on Braum or whatever perfectly anyways. So my question would be, if you're already giving up some of that attack speed, how does 140 really feel when you're actually moving between those auto attacks? Because you might end up attacking, just as fast, pretty much, between 110 and 140, at least for Braum. Now on a ranged champion or something like that, where you have a bunch of attack speed to begin with in the first place, and so, your attack speed is getting buffed by even more for like a Varus or something like this. Maybe this might feel really, really, really nice. The cooldown thing, Hail of Blades already had a super, super short cooldown. So it depends on the champion. Like, let's say you're a ranged champion, you can abuse the... and they said that. They know that ranged champions will disproportionately be affected by the cooldown. So if you're a Varus or something like that, you're going to be able to run in and use Hail of Blades to trade off of cooldown, pretty frequently. So you might actually get some sort of advantage out of the cooldown being 2 seconds lower. On a champion like Braum or something like that, or any melee champion where you're having to recommit every time, you usually need to wait for some sort of ability to come up in order to allow you to do that. So I don't think anyone takes Hail of Blades Jax, but let's say we were playing Jax, for example, or something like that. Your Hail of Blades cooldown could be 2 seconds, but, well, I mean, if it was 2 seconds, you'd actually just walk at the person and kill them over and over again, right? But your Hail of Blades cooldown could be like, I don't know, like 6 seconds or something like that. And it wouldn't make much of a difference at all, because you really need to wait for your Q to come off of cooldown before you can go back in on them again. Same thing here. If you're playing a champion like Braum, and you're relying on your W's cooldown being longer than Hail of Blades cooldown means that you're just waiting anyways after the cooldown comes back up, and it's not that big of a deal. So, I mean, it's a nice change, it's a nice buff, and Hail of Blades was pretty competitive with with Guardian on Braum. So I'd definitely be curious to try it out. I'll definitely give it a shot, but nothing crazy. This is mostly going to be really good on range champions like Varus and stuff like that might abuse this. Swift play. I'm not really going to go through Swift. Oh my god. Swift play. That is crazy. I'm just reading through some of these Swift play changes anyways because they sound kind of crazy. They're saying that they want to... We're promising a hard cap on how long each game can go. But it doesn't sound like I was looking for like, okay, well, what happens? Are they just going to end the game? But no, it looks like they're just trying to create changes to Swift play to make it even faster, to guarantee that like every game is over by like a certain time. Didn't really even say, but anyways, that's just Swift play normal games shenanigans. Like I said, I had a lot of hope for Swift play as kind of an interesting practice scenario, but then when I saw that like, okay, obviously most of the game is scuffed, but that you'd be able to practice, let's say, like team fighting or something like that, because you get to an accelerated point, because you get to practice laning every single solo queue game or whatever over and over again. But one of the reasons why objective fights and team fights are harder is because you just have way less practice doing them, way less experience, because it takes so much longer to get there. And a lot of games, maybe half of your games, you don't get into those situations. You only get into them a couple of times. So I thought Swift play might be a good practice environment. But then I saw on the last patch they were buffing and nerfing champion stats to make it somewhat balanced, because certain champions obviously performed with the game working differently and scaling working differently. Certain champions were just like way overperforming. And so to try to balance it, they started implementing like ARM balancing, where like the champions aren't balanced the same way as they are in ranked or in draft. And at that point, it loses any value to me. But, if people want to enjoy it, go for it. Game pacing updates. Minion scaling. Changing minion scaling from every 90 seconds to every 60 seconds. Melee minion AD per upgrade is... Oh, this is still in Swift play. It's being reduced to match Classic. I don't know what Classic is. Are we playing Classic World of Warcraft? I guess they're talking about Classic League of Legends. Are they going to replace League with... They're going to replace League with Swift play, by the way, and then they're going to call regular League Classic. Uh-oh. Sudden death. Oh, there is a sudden death thing now. 36 minutes, the game will end via the Nexus burning down. Oh, no. So this is all Swift play stuff here. More champion-specific changes and ARAM changes. Earth stuff. Oh my god. And then we're looking at skins, bug fixes. So that's it. So hope you guys have had a great start to your season. I have, getting Challenger and whatnot. With that being said, good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.